Yeah. Hey, awesome. We're back. So, Liam, let's pick up with performance anxiety. And first off, thank you for being so vulnerable and honest about sharing that that's been part of your journey from that early encounter through to various times that it may have come up throughout your journey. I think it's a topic that many men will identify with, and I think to a degree, but differently, women as well. But I think just sharing awareness of what can be experienced within something that can also be immensely enlightening and beautiful. It's not all just like rainbows, bunnies, and unicorns. That I like the unicorn piece, but like there are challenges that we get to face, and this one is very real because I know, at least in much of our culture and media, there's a lot of pressure put on, or a lot of virility placed around the idea of the penis, and like it's showing up in those ways. So it's not always that case, though. Sometimes it doesn't show up. And so if you'd be willing to jump in and take us through what some of that has been like for you, as well as like some of the things that have used to try and I don't know if conquer is the right word, but to show up with it and face it as a challenge.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's interesting when you thank me for being vulnerable. And the interesting thing I found as I've spoken publicly about the issue, where you might be afraid, oh, I'll be seen as less capable, less manly, less attractive. The complete opposite has been true. I've been nothing but rewarded for speaking openly about my struggles in that area. So that's been really gratifying. So for me, I'm a performance-oriented individual. So for people who know the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3, which means I only care about one thing in every interaction, which is making you love me. So if an erection will help me make you love me, then I want one. So I've tried all the drugs and all the therapies. So Viagra, Cialis, Yohimbine, which is like an African bark derivative, a folk remedy that was incorporated into Western medicine at a low level. I tried self-hypnosis, regular hypnosis. I have tried shockwave therapy, which is a medical device that, for lack of a better word, pulverizes the penis in order to create new vascularity, just in the whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger model. And then I started on injections a year and a half ago, and I've actually found them to be tremendously helpful. So none of these things address libido. So often in a lifestyle play situation, in a group sex situation, I'm struggling to find my libido, my interest in even being there, my memory of what's so fun about sex anyway. But because I'm a performer by orientation, I actually don't care. The lowest priority for me is to have an orgasm or even experience sexual pleasure. It's to make the people in the room love me. So if I can have a serviceable erection that allows me to be my best creative, athletic, sensual self, then I want that erection. And the fact that I may not even be feeling much beyond the gratification of gratifying others doesn't bother me that much.
Mm. That's intriguing. I'm listening to that, pausing on it and ruminating on it, and amazed that you can share that with such clarity. But then it also makes me, look at myself and go, "What where I show up in that equation?" In terms of the interactions. So, if I'm understanding that correctly, your shall we say, physical pleasure, or the delights of sensual pleasure are not a priority in those situations. It's more about this sense of, you say loved, but is love the right word, or is it like accepted?
Adored would be good.
Sorry?
Adored would be good.
Lord would be good. I like that. That's a word I certainly hold near.
But you know what it is? My actual highest priority, and this is in business and social situations, is not to embarrass myself. That's my number one goal in life. Do not embarrass yourself. And I get to be the one who defines what embarrassment is or isn't. Pardon me. So in a group sex situation where I felt having an erection would be the thing to do, and I recognize there are lots of sexual activities that don't require erections, but I want to be the guy who can use his tongue, use his fingers, use his brain, use his words, but also, when called upon, use his erect cock. So for me, discovering a solution to having a non-voluntary erection, that was my gold standard. Could I have an erection that even my own self-doubt could not defeat? And I eventually found it. And so, of course, once you get that taken care of, I'll wait for the question. Right.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes, but having found that thing, which I will describe in a few moments, it now actually makes it possible for me to now go to second and third order objectives. So once I'm not going to embarrass myself, once I'm going to be able to make people love me by my estimation, now I can actually think about my own pleasure.
Yeah.
Rather than being obsessed with letting everyone else down, or more importantly, letting myself down.
Can you share what some of those other secondary and tertiary aspects would be? So we've got the I want to be adored.
Yeah.
What fills in on some of those other positions for you?
Well, there would be actual sexual pleasure. I do remember what that is like. So,
good.
So even though it was very hard to get in touch with in those group sex situations, and so for me, it then becomes, I think, an entire circle of connection. So I do want a spiritual connection with the people I'm involved with. I do want an intellectual connection. I want to respect and admire them for who they are. I'm curious about their life stories. And then if we want to have sex, then I want to be able to do that as well. And that's part of the beauty of the lifestyle. Not that sex is mandatory, but just that sex is possible at all, which it is not in the overwhelming majority of our social interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So what's the shall we say, the ironclad way?
The injection.
The injection. And could you expand on that a little bit, please? I have heard on a fellow podcaster, I've heard from some of their experiences on the Room 77 podcasts.
Right.
But I have put zero time into actually finding out what it is, what the chemical is, just because the idea of sticking a needle in my penis hasn't really ranked high on my desire list. So right. I'm fascinated to learn a little bit more.
Yes, so the drugs there's alprostadil, and there's one which is a hybrid combination of 3 medications called, unimaginatively, Trimix. So it actually and from what I've heard from other people with whom I've spoken and my own experience, it is the gold standard treatment. So you will, if you get the dosage right with a little experimentation, you will be rock hard erect within 10 minutes. And if a fire alarm goes off, and even if you witness a horrible calamity, your erection will come with you wherever you need to go for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, again, depending on the dosing.
And it's a very small, like, diabetic needle that you put into the shaft, the side of the shaft.
Yeah, and like, as I like to say to men, so maybe you'll relate to this. If I had to stick it into the head of my penis, I would not be able to do that. If I had to stick it into my testicles, I would not be able to do that. But the shaft, for me, is a strangely sensitive / insensitive part of my body. And once I was assured by someone who had tried it, because virtually all the growth of this approach is by word of mouth. And the guy said, you know what? I sometimes don't even feel the needle going in. And that's been my experience. So sometimes I do, but it's so brief. It's not even like a COVID shot in your arm. It's a small 6 millimeter tiny bore needle that goes about maybe 5 millimeters into the skin, and that's it. And it's so pain is zero issue. The issue tends to be just choreography. How do you get this in at the right time so that you're not, say, walking around with an erection an hour before anyone else has one because you're just
you're that guy.
Yes, that's right. Part of me longs to be that guy actually with the embarrassment. But for me, it's just a matter which I'm now really good at timing it just when it's pants off time in a lifestyle interaction.
Fascinating. And the associated risks that come with that, like I've heard care of another podcast, like, oh my God, it's staying up too long, which is obviously a dosage risk.
Yeah.
Is there also a disease or bacterial vector risk because you just punctured the skin?
Yeah, you take the usual precautions that a doctor or nurse would with you. So alcohol swabs are a part of the procedure. So you swab the top of the vial from which you draw the medication, and you swab the injection site on your body. And I swab it again once I pull the needle out. And that's a pretty well-known approach to making an injection safe.
Yeah. And then when you proceed to have sexual intimacies, is there a concern around any risk there because you've got even though it's a 6 millimeter or 6 gauge, or
That's
you've got
right.
a small needle, but like human mouth, for example, has a fair amount of bacteria in it. So if you're receiving oral sex, for example, are you at risk of some kind of infection or bacteria?
No, like there might be a tiny drop of blood at the injection site, again, just like with any other injection, but it heals up very fast. And it's interesting because part of doing it properly is massaging the penis after you've made the injection to make sure, because the drug is local, it's not systemic. You're not injecting into a vein so that the molecules can travel to your entire body. It's just very locally expanding within the spongy tissues of the penis. So you have to massage it, and that massaging never makes the blood come back out. So the healing, the coagulation, I guess, at the microscopic level is, as far as I can tell, instantaneous.
Wow, cool. Fascinating. And so what's it like showing up with this rock hard cock?
Well, it's great because I spent so much of my time in group sex situations basically hiding, fearing that I wouldn't have the erection I wanted. And so I was looking for ways to avoid engagement. And now I'm more open to engaging. So I might have other psychological issues, which, sometimes an erectile problem is hiding other issues. You think the problem is my cock and it won't do what I want. But then when you resolve that, you find, oh, there are other things too in terms of self-confidence. So for me, within the lifestyle, it was strange. In every area of my life, I am a very confident person. So socially, in business, athletically, everything. But sex was the one area where I wasn't confident, and that was because I had to depend on an unconscious somatic process. I couldn't will an erection. I didn't know how to generate one spontaneously using only my mind. So I was very uncertain in lifestyle situations, and that was attached to even teenage ideas of my attractiveness or lack of attractiveness. So once I had the erections looked after, then I had to really work on my sense of, I guess this isn't a word that people use positively too often, but my sense of entitlement, that I deserve to be here. I can expect to be found attractive by others. And that was a journey that I had been kept from making because I was so focused on the erection issues. So I'm happy to say I resolved that one too.
Awesome. That's lovely. And was there any particular work or process that you went through to look at that area and address it, like somatic therapy or like Tony Robbins seminar? I mean, I'm just kind of curious how you worked through that piece.
Well, number one is I have an extremely supportive wife who made it her mission to convince me that I was a sexually attractive individual and that she didn't just marry me for my wit.
And sometimes I wasn't as kind and patient as I could have been. You know, there were frequent conversations where I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you possibly look around that room and think that you are not worthy? You've got a better body, you've got a better cock, you've got a better mind. Like, come on. So I wasn't always kind and patient and gentle with him.
But even her vehemence spoke to me. So
Yeah.
that was a factor too. But she was part of it. I did, when I spoke about seeing a hypnotist, he was kind of looking at addressing those deep layers of self-doubt in a way that, as far as I can tell, only hypnotism can do. So your new confidence doesn't come out with a tag on it saying this is 50% your wife and 30% the hypnotherapist and 20% something you read. But I'm pretty sure that that was a factor as well.
Yeah. I recently had experiences with, or at least the rumination around, like, why do some situations have a stronger erotic power over my body and my mind? I mean, I don't separate them really, like, you know, the body mind. I mean, one doesn't live without the other, so why separate them? But for example, there was a very lovely person on this call right now that used her hands upon my cock, and the presence and response that I felt through that engagement was like very invigorating, and I felt attractive, virile, and able to be present in the moment because of the quality of the touch. And I've had other times where I've been touched and suddenly, you know, my penis is like, well, I'm going out for a smoke. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know, and it's not that I don't find the person attractive. It's not that I don't enjoy the connection or the intimacies that are being shared, but there's a quality in the touch that makes me feel maybe less than, or there's something in the difference in the way that that touch interacts with my sense of well-being. And I've only just started to think about that in a deeper sense for personal relationships, as well as, you know, like non-monogamy pieces. But there are these almost like some things like gold standards, like, Kate, your touch to my cock, like I can easily say gold standard, like made me present and like, oh my God, I want to experience more of this. So I've been trying to work on distilling some of those things without being too much about the, shall we say, the physiology of erection, but more about the engagement of what's going on to how that relates and how I show up, as well as I can personally say that, you know, that not good enough kind of thing, which has never really entered my life until very recently, where I suddenly feel, oh my God, I am so much older than, like, we went to a party a while back and most of the people were between 28 and 35.
Right.
And, you know, I'm like, I've got decades on you. And it's not that I couldn't interact and have great conversation, but I was aware that, like, if I was using something like an app or an online experience, that I would have been discounted on the spot, or felt that I'd use that as an excuse for why I might not show up. Because I'm like, you know, who's going to be interested in someone, you know, like that? And it's, you know, I'm in decent physical shape. I think I'm charming, I'm witty. but are still like, I discount myself out of the game immediately versus just showing up regardless of the outcome and not being outcome oriented. And I've never had those as issues prior in my life when I was, quote, younger. And so like there's this, to me, it's this like, okay, new challenges, new things to learn, new things to love and accept and recalibrate on where I'm at this point in my life. So I don't know if any of that resonates with some of your emotionality or experiences.
The remarkable thing for me is how little age is an issue. So forget about myself. So I'm knocked out all the time that about who's interested in a 61-year-old. But we met a couple. The woman was 64, just getting into the lifestyle. 64. So I think most people would say, "Don't be expecting too much. You're 64." And we've got a cultural narrative around women being invisible after 50, 40, pick your number. But apparently she hadn't read the articles because we were introduced to her boyfriend at an event, and he was a very impressive man, 20 years younger than her, and he was happy just to be her boyfriend. So she, rather than, I'm just filling in the blanks, I don't know the whole story, but she just decided that she deserved whatever attention came her way. And so I know I certainly feel that way. And also, perhaps inversely, I'm very comfortable. Like if someone said to my face, "You're too old for me," I'd say, "Oh, no problem. I get it." Like I'm surprised more of
I am too old for you.
I'm surprised more of you aren't saying that to me. So yeah, so I've just really let that go. I'm very comfortable if someone has that feeling as opposed to being defensive or hurt about it. And I think that has kind of a therapeutic, that lack of expectation has a therapeutic effect on my sense of entitlement to the pleasure and attention that does come my way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Liam has found works for him is having a separate sexual encounter, especially if that can be in a date setting. So he likes to be in a room with just one other person. Partly it's because there are no distractions. So that includes me. I'm a distraction. And he likes to have the reassurance that if the woman is there, she's just there for him. There are no ulterior motives. It's not like she's there because her man is into me in a foursome situation. So Liam likes to have that certainty that if a woman is in the room, she's there just for him and there are no distractions. He can focus all his energy and attention on her. And if he can have a date first where he has an opportunity to use his great conversational skills and his excellent interpersonal skills, he feels extra confident in that setting. So that has been a tricky point for us because I feel insecure about him dating other women without me there. I'm more comfortable in the let's do everything together kind of, foursome or group sex situation. But that's one of the ways he's found that addresses some of his performance anxiety and desirability concerns. So I've done a lot of work to allow him to have these experiences.
Yes,
and it's been hard every time, but I really do understand why that's a formula that works for him.
And once you've gone on dates where you're with a beautiful woman and there's no way to explain her presence there except that she's into you because all the other motivations are stripped away. She's not just going along to get along, so to speak, by being part of an orgy or group sex situation. It's not like her partner is so into Kate that she's taking one for the team by being with me. It's just me and her. And then I've been able to take the confidence that comes from that level of affirmation now into group sex situations. So it's actually had an effect that transcends just the date itself.
I love it. Yeah, adaptive strategies. This has come up a lot with Shirley and I lately as well. So I love the topic because there's the individual, there's the other individual, as in one's partner. Mm-hmm. There's the bridge between you, like the connective fabric that makes up your relationship and how you interact. and then on top of which, in non-monogamy, there's potentially n number of others. And how do we find the way to put that puzzle together that creates like a sense of joy and liberty, pleasure, etc., for everyone involved? So it's not just like one person's like, yeah, I've got what I need, yeah, and you're not getting what you need. And it's such an interesting balance because we have different needs, even in like just a one-on-one with each other construct. So how do you find those balances and share perspective that allows the other person to be able to understand where your needs may be coming from, not trying to change them, but trying to find ways to honor them and finding that give and take around how that can work. I loved the couple that I talked to last night. One of the things that they bring to that equation of sharing and, I have different needs than you have different needs, is how do I gift your needs so that your needs can be honored, and understand that probably at some point in the equation you'll be gifting me as well, and find the joy in that giving that creates the space for the other person to find their moment, if you will, and to embrace that moment and create deeper and deeper trust and deeper understanding. So I think it's not something I've really heard a lot of monogamous people talk about. There seems to be more, um, how do I get mine at what I would define as win lose. There's like this idea that it's got to be mine, mine, mine. I need this, or I'm too insecure. You can't be talking to that person. And it's more controlling rather than collaborative and giving. And I consistently am seeing more and more couples that I talk with, or even singles, silly, like a solo polyamorous, for example, that a lot of it comes down to this eye of giving, and creating space for the other people or people's experiences in a process. So it sounds like both of you have found a really lovely balance with some of that.
We're getting there.
I don't know. We're working on it.
Yeah, but like, isn't working on it better than not working on it, right? I mean, and it will probably be different. Like if we connect in 5 years and say, hey, by the way, where are you at with that? I'm sure it will have gone through many iterations and experiences, and where they come to. The thing I found really wonderful as a focal point from last night's conversation is that life's easy when you're on the same page, right? You celebrate the win. Woo, we had a great time. That was fantastic. But how much do you learn from that versus maybe the 10% of the time, or whatever that number might be, where there are the oops, speed bump, how am I going to, and both the people in the other couple, both of them were like, yeah, it's the 10% that actually yields the greatest growth and learning opportunities. And although in the moment you can be like, oh, that's really uncomfortable, that once you start to at least, okay, let's just breathe through this. Let's start communicating. Maybe we go to our therapist and have a joint session where we both feel safe in the communication and start to build around an understanding of, those things. But they're like, now those 10%, those are just like these opportunities. So, okay, let's start like digging into this, because what's it going to yield on a growth perspective? And so it's like that growth mindset that I think can be really beneficial. And it made me want to like do some reframing on my own pieces that I'm working on too. Like, okay, this is great opportunity. Good. This is yielding insights into things that I've got like a sticking point on, if you will. Wow.
All right. What was next on your list?
Next on the list, definition of what sex means or sex is to you. Like, I know we just talked about the idea of, like if you need an erection on demand, great to have it. But like, does sex limit itself to that idea of, shall we say, heteronormative penetrative sex? Or for you, can something be very sexy or sexual or sensual and still have a level of gratification to it that you could equate as a, oh, that was wonderful, I had a great time, even though you might not have fucked or been fucked or something like that?
Well, I had an incident last year where I was in a pool, as one is in so many of these non-monogamous events, and there was someone who had really captured my attention, and so I went over to her and just made small talk, and the small talk progressed to touching and kissing, and eventually I went back to her room to be with her. And I would say that the part in the pool where we escalated slowly through these stages of small talk, right through to touching and kissing, was more exciting than the sex in the room. When I looked at it and just said to be objective, because there was a thrill that was a part of that. I guess there was a risk when I kind of put myself out there and let her know that I found her attractive, and she was doing the same, and that give and take. So that's a story just to illustrate that for me, I'm alive to all the possibilities. So even with all my emphasis on erections and penetration, I'm really in it more for those moments that happened in the pool than in what everyone else would consider the end game.
Yeah, yeah. How about you, Kate? How do you define like what's sex or sexy for you? Like,
Um, I think for me, the sexiest thing is um, to be involved in creating pleasure for someone else. So if I can augment another couple's experience by being there and, just doing whatever feels like would be welcome and pleasurable for them, that brings me a lot of pleasure. So even if I'm not having sex, if I'm in a group sex situation, and I like to think of myself as a little like butterfly, and I just kind of flit about from grouping to grouping, and just maybe a little touch here, a kiss there, a lick there, um, I'm very energetic. So if I can feel like an intake of breath at my touch, or if I kiss someone and they really like lean into it,
mm,
that brings me a lot of sensual pleasure. So I said to a friend recently, I think sex is one of my spiritual gifts because I feel like in a sexual space, there's a veil that comes down where I can see people more clearly, and I feel like I can really read their energy effectively. And so for me, it feels like I have this gift of real sensitivity in a sexual space, and I want to bring it to you in whatever way I feel would bring you pleasure. Um, and that rarely involves me getting pounded, which I enjoy. But yeah, my highest level of pleasure is bringing other people pleasure in whatever way I can use my sensitivity.
yeah. Wow. Love it. Hmm. So,
Yeah.
in other,
The door for him.
Yeah,
so
her 15-year-old is here just to pick up some stuff, so
yeah,
she's gonna help him. Yeah, but and you want to talk about bi stuff as well, right?
yeah, yeah. In terms of the sexual expression and authenticity around, the arousal, the way that you like to share that with people of different genders, and how that's shown up for you. And the reason I bring that up is when I first started many, many decades ago, areas around bisexuality, and my experience was predominantly founded initially at that time in the United States. Although since then I've been in other places where they've got less concerns around gender and more around just pleasure and connection. But it was kind of a taboo, for example, to have male bisexuality. Females having sex with each other was like, oh, that's great, that's hot, kind of stuff, and somewhat pressured to some extent as well. And I'm curious, because I think both of you have said that you identify as bisexuals. And I'm curious, like, how that's been received as you've shared that information with people, and how that feels supported or could be better, etc., or whatever that might have been for you. So I'm just fascinated to see how that's shown up for you.
Yeah, for me, it's been remarkable. So many men will say, on the side, I'm kind of interested in guys too, but I don't put it out there on my profile, and I don't let it be known because I'm afraid of being judged. So I made a decision 6 years ago not to be quiet about it or secretive at all. We wrote a blog post about it, and we have since given seminars on the subject and have done a podcast on it. And I've gotten nothing but so much support. It's like again, an instance that one would think is vulnerable and scary, where I've gotten nothing but affirmation, and at a very high level. And it's surprising because when you go first, at least again in a North American setting, it feels like I can't meet a wholly straight guy anymore. So every one of them, it's not on their profile, but they'll come up to me or they'll come up to Kate and say, hey, I know Liam's kind of into this, and I just want him to know that my husband's also kind of interested, but he doesn't want to say it. And just all sorts of, and people that I would have guessed were 110% straight, to use the cliche that's so often used in profiles. No, they're quite interested in cock too.
I think that's awesome. That that touches my heart, that there's been a profound shift, because I know 20 years ago, for example, that was definitely quite taboo in the lifestyle parties and events that I would attend. And I thought were pretty liberal. Most of those were based in San Francisco Bay Area, which, you'd be like, come on, really? But so that brings me much joy. And I think that's lovely, that even though people may not be comfortable going and putting it out there on a public profile, for example, that at least in conversation, and then in those moments where it actually can be quite intimate to share, that there is an encouragement and a support and an appreciation. So I'm gonna go with fucking A. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I remember coming to the conclusion myself that I just had this epiphany about the future, and I don't have many of those. I'm not a stock forecaster, but I just felt like, oh, I get this. 20 years from now, everyone's going to be bi or pan, or however you want to describe it. And I'm going to feel like an idiot. I'm going to feel like a true old man, because I was somehow adhering to a schoolyard code from the 1960s about what wasn't and wasn't acceptable between men. So I just challenged myself with that thought experiment, and then that really led to everything else for me.
That's awesome. How about you, Kate?
Well, it's never really been a struggle for me, just because we started this lifestyle because of my bisexuality. And quite often I find that I'm kind of indifferent to the men in the room, but I'm really drawn to the women. So it's nice that in this lifestyle, that's kind of the norm, that the women are the ones who initiate. And it's quite often, one woman will come to another and, start the flirting and touching and kissing. And that's what starts the whole party. So that's very easy for me. That's mostly what I'm there for and interested in. And, I often say I've got a great cock at home. What I don't have is, that female energy. So yeah, I've found lots of women who are, kind of performative in their bisexual interest, just because they understand it's kind of the price of admission. But I've also met lots of women who are genuinely bisexual and really enthusiastic about making a connection with another enthusiastic woman who is not there to be performative for the men. I'm just there because I authentically love pussy. So, so yeah, it's been really nice, and it's provided this setting where I'm not sure how else I would have been able to experience and, you know, kind of live into my bisexuality had we not been in this lifestyle. So it's offered both of us these settings and opportunities to meet people and experiment and, you know, play with that side of ourselves that otherwise might not have an outlet.
But you had an opportunity to take it beyond that too, 18 months ago, to
Yes,
for it not to just be an expression of play, but something deeper.
yeah. So I had a 1 year relationship with a woman who I was deeply in love with, and you know, it ended a few months ago, and I was pretty heartbroken about it. But I was able to prove to myself that this is more than just a sexual preference. This is a real, you know, a place where I can be very emotionally intimate as well with a woman. And so that was good. It was sad and hard, but also good. Just to really embrace my like bisexual title. I feel like I'm fully entitled now to use that term, because not only do I like pussy, I also have really deeply loved a woman. So
Yeah. It's kind of, to me, the terminology I've often used is one can be bisexual, but are you birelational? So there's can you share deeper heart space or romance, as it were, versus just the more like physical aspects, the pleasuring aspects of it. And once again, I come to the conclusion that a lot of our language is quite limited. It doesn't really define or give us a lot of opportunity. And especially when you look at something as complex as consensual non-monogamy, the variety of expression that can exist doesn't have adequate language to describe it. And the, you know, we've managed to come up with a few new words like compersion, which is awesome, and a few other things like comet lover, because they only come around once in a while, and things like that. But there's still, like, on the kind of the intimacy aspects, or like the, you know, the spiritual aspects of some of those things that can exist, we lack the language. And so we stumble around trying to define things, you know, long sentences that one word might help summarize, for example.
yeah, I think biromantic is a word I've heard, and I would say I am definitely biromantic, but Liam is not. So
So far,
right? He hasn't met the right man.
Good. Yeah.
well, I tried. I was on field for 3 months, and I was just dumbfounded by the lack of quality interaction. So everyone says, "Oh, field, that's the site for smart people to meet other smart people to hook up." And I got a lot of, "Yo, dude, what's up? You're hot," and just, you know, I'd written carefully crafted paragraphs to communicate who I was, and getting that in return was pretty dispiriting. But I don't doubt that there are guys like me out there, but I just haven't found them yet. So that's why I say, yeah, up to now, I have not been biromantic, but I think the potential is there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating dilemma. Like, these apps provide us access to potentially you know, a global level of connection, and at the same time, our cultures are so consumptive that it's swipe left, swipe right, right, left, 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 you know, and so you get this behavior that's not even pausing to, say, digest the lovely words that you put forward, because it is, you know, the consumptive nature of it. Do you have time to read a paragraph? Well, one would hope, but like everything in our society seems to be accelerating into, from seconds of attention span to micro or nanoseconds of attention span. Like, oh, dick, you know, and and then we're done. So I'm curious to see over like the next 5 to 10 years, as we've done these large expansions of our awareness around different expressions and transformations of experience. When are we going to start circling back to the quality of connection versus just the consumptiveness of connection, if that makes sense? Like,
Funny thing is, I know. So Kate had difficulty. So she was on field as well, and
Looking for a woman.
and she was just inundated with basically, "Hey, could you be the third for me and my man?" So just like, oh, that's such a tired. Like, nothing wrong with FMF threesomes, but it's not what she was looking for at all. But you know that there are women out there like her looking for what she wants, and it's just a matter of finding each other. So even you think, oh well, field will be the haven for that. It's not. But just like I know there are guys like me out there looking for what I'm looking for, but finding them has so far proved elusive. And I think the same thing for you.
yeah, I same for myself as well. I mean, we used field for a bit. Shirley had a torrential downpouring of men seeking, interaction either as a third or, hey, would you come out on a date solo? Even though her profile at one point was like, hey, I'm not looking for any of that. I'm just looking for women, and you'd think that that would be a fairly obvious statement and you'd move on. But consistently, what we've found is that in person is the way that you get to read and show up. So you read other people and you get to show up and you get to see and feel the chemistry. And so, for example, the swingcations, which is where we also met you, those have been by far the quality yield of connection, which both Shirley and I, we're not looking for casual sex. Like, I had tons of that when I was young. I'm not interested in just putting my penis into something. I want to experience a vibrancy of connection, the depth of the person and how they're showing up in their life. That's what engages me now. And the fact that we can enjoy consensual, sensual play as an added dimension is just like bonanza. So now the challenge comes: how do you get to go to these swingcations while still trying to balance out the regular life needs?
Right.
The answer is make it your job, which is what I
Tell me more about that, because you mentioned that in the first interview, and I know that you reached out to us about the European or the Mediterranean adventure that you've put up. But tell me how this has transformed into your job now, or your career, or your passion.
We agree with you that going on these lifestyle vacations or takeovers is really the best way to meet people. And we've been to all kinds of events in North America. We've spoken at all the Podcastapalooza events. We've been to a lot of the Room 77 events. And we love that idea of bringing together a group of people who are not only sexually open, but also have the additional interest of like a certain kind of podcast, because it's going to bring together similar minded people. So what we felt was missing was a European option. So we would often do a lifestyle warm weather trip and then a European trip for ourselves,
which
just
was
the
vanilla.
two of us, which was vanilla. And we thought, what if we could bring these things together? And we couldn't find a good option other than Capdag, which was not great for us. And so we decided to put together those options ourselves. So we've recently launched Sapio Tours, which is a small group takeover of big villas in Europe. So far we've
for lifestyle people with cultural interests.
Yeah, so they're all culturally and historically interesting places where we found large accommodations where we can bring 8 to 12 couples together. And bring our common interests in terms of like, we're into art and history and food and wine
and also sex.
And also sex. So to bring those people together in an interesting place where sex is a possibility but not a requirement, has been my new venture. And it's exciting and scary. But yeah, that's what I've quit teaching to do.
Fantastic. I love it. The transformation of what one's doing with one's time to a greater sense of personal alignment, purpose, passion. Not that teaching doesn't have its benefits, obviously. That's really
as someone with an entrepreneurial background, just to see, oh, this isn't just trying to be the fifth iteration of a tired business model. This is a completely different market segment, to use that language, that has not been addressed at all. So if you just say non-monogamy plus cultural intellectual interests plus Europe, let's say, then that no one else is doing that. So you don't need to find 500 people to do that. You just need to find these small groups. And then the level of bonding that happens spending 7 days together with a curated group around a common interest is something that's unbelievable.
I love it. I love it. I mean, it makes sense. I know we have other friends that are doing the more, shall we say, the active lifestyle events where it's based around some of the, like hiking a glacier, for example. And I just think it's pure genius. I really do. Like, find the areas that resonate in how you connect, because ultimately, like what I suspect, and maybe you can confirm this from your experiences as well, if you get a gathering with, shall we say, a smaller group that have very similar, in your case, the sapiosexual like aspects of it, the chances of feeling that sense of connection and community, and when that translates, or if that translates into sensuality and sensual play, the chances are that frequency is already aligned. So it's going to be like, ta-da, versus like, oh, she wants to go to the opera and he wants to go to a baseball game, kind of thing like that, where there's a disconnect. So
yeah, well, it's almost like putting together what we do with what Naughty Jim does. It's the non-monogamy and business model. So you just fill in that blank, non-monogamy. And so for us, cultural things, for them, fitness and outdoor adventure. And there are going to be other options as well.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. We are, is it sapiotours.com?
Yeah.
It's not CA for Canada?
No.
Not in this case.
Wonderful. We're coming up on the hour. There were a couple of other topics that I'd wanted to look at, such as the evolution or the experience of identifying, polyamory, open lifestyle, or fluidity. And I would like to come back to that topic with a potential another interview, if that'd be okay with you, because I'm really fascinated by the potential that you may have looked at some of those things with your intellectual capacities and the way you look at things and dissect things. I'm really intrigued by that, and I love that kind of engagement, because I know when we look at categorization or pigeonholing, that as a general, humans like to no, it's one or the, and I think clearly from the way that you live your life, you don't find those tags, those identifications. You find what's working for you. And so I'd like to kind of turn that lens towards non-monogamy and see what your thoughts are around some of that at a future conversation, if that would be possible.
Yeah. Now we could take a couple extra minutes and just get it done now.
Yeah. I've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah, that should be good. And
Okay.
then if you want to circle back months later as you're working on the book, and obviously we're happy to talk to you anytime. But just to get this sort of project to put a bow on it, we could do that probably right now.
Yeah, I think the answer is fairly simple. And I always say that labels are a good way to start a conversation, but they're not the end of the conversation. So if you were to put a label on us for the majority of our decade in the lifestyle, it would be swingers. You know, we've had relationships with people that don't go beyond friendship, that include sex. But we have also ventured recently into what would be called an open relationship style, where Liam dates separately, or even a polyamorous relationship style where, you know, I have deep feelings for a woman. But ultimately, we are in this because we wanted to get away from the traditional model of relationships. We didn't want to be monogamous. We didn't want to put ourselves into that box. And when we first started out, we did not know what the options were. We just knew that we wanted to write our own story and to, you know, kind of throw out the old script and write a new one. And so we just started doing what felt right and what felt good and warm in the moment. And I think most of the time, with a few exceptions, we've continued to do that, just kind of follow our interests and our hearts. And yeah, labels are not, they're not always helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel very confident that if we arrive at a place where we say, this is us, there will not be a name for it. We'll have to invent our own.
I love it. Yeah. As you've gone on that journey of finding what feels warm and right with you, how has your communication and the confidence in your communication skills to get you there, how has that evolved? Or has it, you know, like from say 10 years ago?
That's been a big challenge for us, because to use my desire for separate dating as a case study, Kate had a reaction in terms of feeling threatened by it. And my immediate response was trying to convince her that she shouldn't feel threatened at all, that my motives are pure, that this will be good for us, rather than recognizing the sense of danger that she felt. So I made a massive mistake. I lawyered up, as people like to say, and that's my own internal crew of lawyers were suddenly on the clock and arguing my case, defending my good name, advocating for my interest, everything except for meeting her where she felt vulnerable and threatened. So there was a big lesson to learn, and it took a long time, because what I can say in 3 sentences now took months and months and therapy and reading books and talking to each other to learn. So I feel now, I said to Kate earlier today, I'm dying for our next fight, because I'm so well equipped. You're going to be so impressed by how I handle this time. What is there out there? Is there any little dispute we can fan into a flame of a major fight, and then you'll see how amazing I am now. So, but I am. The downside is I do feel regret over how I handled that, and I've apologized to Kate for that, because I just lost my way in terms of prioritizing my needs or defending myself over dealing with the sense of hurt felt by the person I loved more than anyone else.
But it's hard when you have different attachment styles and, you know, different sensitivities to, you know, to look at a partner who is acting in a way or reacting in a way that doesn't make sense to you. It's hard to be empathetic and to be soft in that situation, because you're just kind of feeling like, what's wrong with you? Like, stop. I'm not going to leave you. Why would you think that? So to recognize that we are different people, we grew up in different situations, we have different insecurities and sensitivities, and to honor those differences rather than, you know, feeling like, well, that's silly. Why would you think that? That's been a whole journey. So we're both working hard to be sensitive and loving and gracious with each other, when, you know, as we found this year, we're kind of wanting different things. And in how do you accommodate your partner when you love them and you want the best for them, but you also need to take care of yourself and this joint relationship. So it's been hard, but we've, I think, made a lot of progress and come a long way.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'm deeply touched to hear you sharing that, and celebrate your commitment to each other and yourselves to find that path and find that way that's, shall we say, kinder, more communicative and more compassionate. I definitely resonate with that. I feel like I'm definitely in that kind of zone of that learning, growth, and awareness. And I think it's a beautiful place to be. I don't know if I've quite got your enthusiasm for what's the next fight, Liam. And yeah, maybe I'll get there. That's beautiful. Wow, inspiring. Love it. Really do. I feel like that's a really beautiful place to kind of leave things
Sure.
for today's interview.
I sensed we were close.
Say again.
I sensed we were close.
Yeah, I love it. No, thank you for putting that forward. Alrighty. Same thing. Share the interview recording. Yeah,
Sure.
you were able to get to the last one. It came through okay.
Yeah.